100 men and women who were out in 1916, who were arrested, imprisoned in Frangach, who were here in Kerry or fought in Dublin, and we were very, very... And Thomas, moving on from that, if you have so much high unemployment in Kerry in 1914 and the Great War breaks out, does it impact on the recruitment of young Kerry men into the British Army, or were they joining the army anyway, generally up to that point?
The war is very important because just after the rising, John Dillon, who was Redmond's deputy, talks about Ireland and England having finally been reconciled. And I think that's the sort of key for a lot of people who are involved in 1916. It's just that I think we need to understand now is just how big World War I was here and how many people did join up. Whether it's, you know, Eamon Cant's brother William, who in fact dies in 1917, or John Joe Sheehy's brother, or Ernie O'Malley's brother, or indeed Tom Barry himself. So I think the war is a really fundamental moment, and it really encapsulates, or it's a very big part of what's going on in Ireland, and part of that kind of fact that Ireland is so involved in the involved in the war is very much a big part of the inspiration for the people who decide to rebel, so to speak.
Perhaps the GAA in 1914-15 and its interconnection with the Irish Volunteers, and is it that strong?
Yeah, well, by 1914 the GAA is the largest sporting cultural organisation in Ireland. It has over 500 affiliated clubs, and by then Kerry has established its tradition that it still holds to this day on the football field. But to take it back just a little bit before that, I mean, you can't understand 1916, you can't understand what happened without the Gaelic revival and the cultural revival which happened in the 1890s. This sense of Irish people awakening to the fact that they are a separate country, a separate nation, that they don't see themselves as being just a province of England. They are an ancient country with an ancient heritage and an ancient culture. And the GAA is very much part of Gaelic revival, along with the Gaelic League and so on. And there's a whole generation of cultural nationalists who revitalised the GAA in the years around 1900, in the decade before the Rising, and they see the GAA's role as playing this part in this cultural liberation movement of Irish society. But of course, for a lot of them, becoming a cultural nationalist is only one step away from being radicalised. And there's a very famous, or there's a very interesting memoir in the Bureau of Military History Archives by a man called Pádraig O'Kelly. He's actually from Louth. But he talks about how he thinks his generation experiences what he called a natural graduation from being language enthusiasts, sports enthusiasts, to being radical political enthusiasts and radical politicians and political radicals. And the GAA is very much a part of that. And in the decade before 1916, you can see many people in the GAA beginning to try and turn down a more radical road. For example, you've got things like, in 1905, you've got the infamous Foreign Games ban, which is introduced, basically stating, if you play foreign games, i.e. British games, rugby, soccer, cricket, you are going against your Irishness and sense of Irish nationality. So there's that duality that's coming into Irish society. It's us and them. You're either a Gael or a West Brit, as that term is coined from them. And also at the same time, of course, they bring in their infamous ban on police and military personnel joining GAA. And again, the whole idea is, if you remember the RIC, the British Army, you're an agent of a foreign power, and therefore why, in an organisation which is trying to promote Irishness and a sense of separate nationality, should we welcome you on board? And of course, when the volunteers then are established, the GAA is very quickly close links are established. So at the inaugural meeting in the Rotunda, Luke O'Toole, who's the General Secretary of the GAA, he actually speaks to the crowd. In January 1914, James Nolan, the President of GAA, addresses a large group of GAA members and says, I want every GAA member to learn how to shoot, to join the volunteers and learn how to shoot straight. And of course in Kerry, and it's probably unique, the GAA is the driving force for the volunteers here. You've got Austin Stack, who organises the first meeting of the volunteers in Tralee. Dick Fitzgerald, I'm sure Father Tom will talk about him. Dick is a captain in the Killarney contingent. Pat O'Shea and Castle Gregory very much uses the GAA to, get membership for the Castle Gregory.
Killarney looked for the Oireachtas from 1914. The Gaelic League was very strong there, founded by a young priest from Carsabeen, Killarney, Cairo Brennan. Ty Doherty's here tonight. He did a special study on Cairo Brennan, a very important man, hugely important. In any case, they looked to have the Gaelic, the Oireachtas in Killarney, but they were up against it because they said Galway wasn't so good. Only 6,000 people turned up. What they did was interesting, a campaign of letters. And they decided, and this is very important, a man called T.T. O'Connor said, we really do need this to be able to boost the tourism. It had gone dead because of the threat of civil war. This is now 1914, a threat of civil war. And they appointed Sean Tobin, Corkman, as full-time secretary to organise the Oireachtas. And it's been 6 months, and 10,000 people took part in that Oireachtas. It was a very important week in Killarney because 10,000 people turned up. One train alone, 1,200 people came on it. And the hotels and the guest houses made a great effort to receive all the people. What's most important point of view of the volunteers, 2,500 volunteers. Now the volunteers were founded in the Gaelic League meeting in Killarney only the previous November 28, 1913, 3 days after Dublin. November, 40 men at the language school or language class organised by Anshaugh, Paddy Shukru from Burnham in Dingle. We have the names of 36 and then this book, fair play to the editors putting them in. And you had 36. Within 8 or 9 years, but less actually in 6 years, that group led in East and South Kerry alone, not North or West Kerry, 3,390 from that 36, from that 40. Enormous growth really out of the volunteers, despite the war. In any case, 2,500 marched. It was also a competition in Lord Kenmare's grounds, and the first prize, Limerick Corps came first, Tralee came second. Killarney didn't come anywhere, but my men from Killarney came out of Doon, which is a Methodist church, was their headquarters, armed to the teeth. Armed to the teeth. I have a picture of the volunteers, they're all wearing bandoliers, but the Killarney lads had weapons, including bayonets, and they marched through the streets of Killarney, all 40 of them I think, and the 12 RIC men on duty, it says, went dumbfounded. They never knew these guys were. What they didn't know was that there were props from Hollywood, the Cale & Filler Company.
Men and women in Dublin as part of the planning of the Rising, as part of these organisations. The most famous being, of course, the O'Reilly from Ballylongford. If you could give us some information on the O'Reilly.
Well, the O'Reilly was treasurer of the volunteer movement and director of arms. And it's interesting to note that his ideas about arming the volunteers, they actually came from the 5 odd years that he spent in America. And he was very impressed by the fact that it was in the American Constitution that the citizenry have the right to bear arms. Now, I know that is very sinister connotations nowadays, but it didn't have in the early years of the 20th century. And because of that, he always maintained that any volunteer force would be useless unless armed. And as far back as 1912, he was writing in Irish Freedom in Tom Topp's paper, the foundation of all governments rests on the possession of arms. And another thing he said was, when he was asked to join the IRB, and he was opposed in principle to secret societies, but when he was asked to join the IRB, he said, yes, I will join them, he said, when every member has a rifle and 1,000 rounds of ammunition. You know, so that was his idea. I suppose that, as Jim has already said, he got kind of a birthday present in April 1914 when the UVF brought in the original 20,000 rifles into Ireland and 3 million rounds of ammunition. And of course, they were well bankrolled, unlike the Irish volunteers. And just as an example, Lord Ivy, one of the Guinnesses, he pledged £10,000 in support of the Ulster Volunteer Force. That'll give you an idea. The other thing I should say, I think, is that the next thing then was that the Irish volunteers, of course, wanted to have guns, just as the Ulster volunteers had. And the strange thing is that the committee that was formed to get that going was based in London. And I was going to say the other strange thing, but I could see Mary McAuliffe trying to glass at me, is that a large number of those people were actually ladies. People like Alice Stopford Green and Molly Osgood, Molly Childers. And of course the O'Reilly, after the whole gun running, when he met Maurice Moore in Boswell's hotel, well known to Minister Deanahan, when he met Maurice Moore, he introduced Mary Spring Rice from Fines to Maurice Moore. He said, here is the person that was behind this whole operation. So he gave her full credit.
Rising that Casement was involved in planning the arms coming into Kerry. How important would that have been had it happened.
It's often forgotten that he actually came back to Ireland to stop the rising because he was convinced it was going to be a disaster, a military disaster. And in reality, it was. But the British went and made a bigger disaster of it for themselves and turned it into a victory for the volunteers by their actions. One thing you can say about the rising was that in that period, Murphy's Law was in vogue in Kerry. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. I mean, when you look at Ballycassan, they came down to steal a radio down in Castlevine and set up a radio station in Ballarty and Tralee and to contact the Ard. But the Ard had no radio. If the Ard had a radio, they wouldn't have had the problem in the first place. The Ard had sailed before Dublin said don't arrive until Sunday evening. They were told to arrive between Thursday and Sunday, and they arrived at the start. And then even when it comes down to there's so many different things that the U-boat arrived. Casement was supposed to be on the Ard. It was to be transferred to the Ard for the landing. But the U-boat made no effort to try and find the Ard. Presumably they thought maybe they'd landed the guns or something, but there was no effort made. It was here, it was in the bay. There aren't that many ships in Tralee Bay at any time, but they never tried to contact it.